She was the only child of German-born Fredel Adler Bergman and Swedish artist and photographer Justus Bergman. Sadly, Ingrid lost her father when she was 13 and her mother when she was just 2 years old. Her character was significantly impacted by these early losses, which gave her the quiet fortitude, independence, and emotional sensitivity that would later come to define her on-screen persona. When Ingrid was a little girl, her father encouraged her to perform in front of his camera, which opened her eyes to the power of performance and the wonder of self-expression. Bergman attended the Royal Dramatic Theatre School in Stockholm, the same esteemed establishment that had taught Greta Garbo. After finishing her studies in Sweden, she demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to portray sensitivity and truth in her early performances, allowing spectators to enter her inner world. Her breakout performance was in the Swedish film Intermezzo in 1936, where her genuineness and warmth enthralled both audiences and reviewers. Hollywood producer David Olsnick invited her to the United States to remake the movie in English after Intermezzo's success. Bergman became an immediate success after making her Hollywood debut in the romantic drama Intermezzo in 1939. The gorgeous, highly stylized actresses of the era were in stark contrast to her fresh-faced naturalism, and viewers enthusiastically embraced her genuineness. Ingrid Bergman rose to prominence as one of Hollywood's biggest actors. Throughout the 1940s, she solidified her position in cinematic history with her iconic portrayal of Ilsa Lund in Casablanca, 1942. Opposite Humphrey Bogart, Bergman gave the tale of love, sacrifice, and wartime loss a devastating sense of realism with her bright eyes and subdued grief. Following this triumph, she gave strong performances in the films For Whom the Bell Tolls 1943, Gaslight 1944, for which she received her first Academy Award for Best Actress, and The Bells of St. Mary's 1945, in which she played a sympathetic nun opposite Bing Crosby. She gained a reputation as one of the most admired actresses of her generation, thanks to each part that demonstrated her ability to represent nuanced emotions with grace and wisdom. Bergman and Rosaline worked together on a number of films during her time in Italy, such as Europe 51 1952 and Journey to Italy 1954. Despite not being box office hits at the time, these films would go on to become regarded as pioneers of contemporary cinema that foreshadowed the existential quest and emotional alienation themes that were later addressed by filmmakers. Bergman steadily reconstructed her career following the dissolution of her marriage to Rossellini, triumphantly returned to Hollywood with Anastasia 1956, for which she received her second Academy Award. Viewers accepted her again after she portrayed a lost lady who was fighting to regain her identity, which they interpreted as a metaphor for her own salvation. Bergman went on to play a wide range of parts in both Europe and America, collaborating with some of the best filmmakers of her time, such as Ingmar Bergman, who was unrelated to Alfred Hitchcock, Jean Reno, and George Cukor. Her latter performances demonstrated the complete development of her artistry, especially in Ingmar Bergman's 1978 Autumn Sonata. Her portrayal of a pianist facing her estranged daughter in the movie was incredibly poignant, reflecting her own nuanced motherhood experiences. She was nominated for an Academy Award for it, solidifying her place among the greatest actors to ever appear on screen. Like her renowned film career, Ingrid Bergman's personal life was characterized by intense emotion, complexity, and a never-ending quest for fulfillment and the truth. She married Peter Lindström, Roberto Rossellini, and Lars Schmidt 3 times during her lifetime. Additionally, every relationship marked a new phase in her development as an artist and a woman. These marriages represented the shifting social expectations that were placed on women in the 20th century. In addition to the development of her work, Bergman's life was a fascinating mashup of love, scandal, artistry, and tenacity through her marriages. In 1937, when she was still in her 20s and starting to establish herself in the movie industry, she wed Peter Lindström, a Swedish neurosurgeon. In her first marriage, when Bergman moved from her early Swedish films to global fame, Lindström, a solid and intellectual guy, gave her a sense of stability. Pia Lindström, the couple's 1938 daughter, would go on to become a well-known television journalist. In the early years of their marriage, Ingrid and Peter led a contented and traditional life, particularly when Bergman accepted a contract offer from Hollywood producer David Olsnick and relocated to the United States. But as Bergman's notoriety increased, the responsibilities of performing and traveling took over her life. While Lindström's career kept him firmly established in the medical field, they progressively drifted apart due to their divergent goals and ways of living. Due to emotional separation and distance, the marriage had started to fail by the late 1940s. Bergman's early years were supported by her first marriage, but it was unable to withstand the transformational force of her personal wants and artistic drive. A significant turning point in Bergman's life, both personally and professionally, was their divorce in 1950. Her second marriage to the renowned Italian filmmaker Roberto Rossellini was one of the most contentious and intense romantic relationships in Hollywood history. In search of a fresh artistic challenge, Bergman met Rossellini, who had sent him a letter praising his near-realist pictures, including Rome, Open City. After they met, They began a fast-paced courtship that went against social norms and shocked the movie business. Rossellini was married at the time, while Bergman was still wed to Lindström. The American people and media were incensed when it was revealed that Bergman was expecting Rossellini's child. After being praised for her grace and purity, America's favorite movie queen was abruptly demonized and called immoral. Bergman was temporarily banished from Hollywood as a result of the affair. However, she and Rossellini set off on a daring new creative journey in Europe. Together, they produced a number of pictures that, despite their original misunderstandings, are now recognized as masterworks of emotional realism, such as Stromboli 1950, Europe 1952, and Journey to Italy 1954. 3 children were born to Bergman and Rossellini, twin daughters Isabella and Iota, and a son Roberto. In particular, Isabella Rossellini would continue her mother's tradition as a celebrated actress and model, but in the end, the very passion that had brought Bergman and Rossellini together caused them to drift apart. Due to Rossellini's domineering behavior, cultural divides, and creative conflicts, their marriage had soured by 1957. One of the most well-known and turbulent love stories in cinema history came to an end with their divorce. Bergman married Lars Schmidt, a Swedish theatrical producer who shared her passion for the arts but provided a calmer, more sensible company. In 1958, as she sought stability and a return to normalcy after years of conflict and public scrutiny, Bergman's yearning for harmony and balance was reflected in this third marriage. She continued to act in theater, television, and movies while splitting her time between Europe and America with Schmidt. She also led a more secluded home life. Schmidt encouraged Bergman's career by frequently going to film festivals and theater premieres with her, but still giving her the artistic independence she required. Even though their passion had faded, their marriage lasted for almost 20 years, which is evidence of their friendship and regard for one another. In 1975, they finally got divorced, but this time around was more cordial than her others. Until her passing, Bergman and Schmidt were close friends, and he would go on to contribute to her legacy by keeping her memoirs and archives. Years after her passing, Ingrid Bergman's private note came to light, altering many people's perceptions of her as a genuinely human woman who struggled with love, shame, and the fallout from following her heart. In addition to being a great actor, her silent admission of a close, passionate relationship she previously had with Gregory Peck, her co-star in Alfred Hitchcock's 1945 masterwork Spellbound, was one of the note's most startling discoveries. Bergman's own words and P.C.'s later confession, despite the world's long-held suspicion that there had been more than just professional chemistry between them, depicted 2 individuals who, during one of the most emotionally charged times of their lives, discovered something strong, ephemeral, and unforgettable in one another. Years later, Gregory Peck acknowledged what many had previously suspected. While filming Spellbound, he had a brief but intense romance with Bergman during his first marriage to Greta Kusin. P.C. stated bluntly in a 1987 interview with People magazine, "I think that's where I ought to stop. All I can say is that I had a real love for her. I was a kid, she was a young woman. We worked closely together and diligently for weeks." His remarks were a silent appeal for comprehension as much as a confession, recognizing that their closeness had developed from a sincere bond created in the furnace of creative cooperation rather than from a scandalous motive. After a lifetime of notoriety, heartache, and redemption, Bergman's note, penned years later, captured her lasting emotions about that period. She said that Gregory was strong, caring, and gentle in a way that scared her. "He served as a reminder of both my desires and my inability to maintain them in a partner." According to these lines, Bergman saw the affair as an emotional turning point that tormented her in private moments, rather than a pointless liaison. In addition to being she found in Peck a reflection of her own need for depth and stability in a world that was always asking her to please and move on. There was no denying the 2 stars' connection on the Spellbound set. As always, the observer, Hitchcock saw the spark and took advantage of it to create tense and vulnerable moments. The film's tale of an amnesiac guy and a doctor falling in love in the midst of psychological turmoil became a haunting mirror of their own experiences. In a subsequent interview, Bergman admitted, "I think I fell in love with the man in front of and behind the camera." When you pretend to love someone, it can sometimes become real before you even realize it. Audiences could not have predicted the amount of truth in that sentence. The affair was a complex mixture of remorse and passion for Peck. He had a young family, was married, and struggled to balance desire and obligation. At the time, Bergman was also wed to Dr. Peter Lindström. However, the production's intensity and the emotional closeness that acting can create enthralled both of them. Bergman wrote of the remorse she carried in her note, "We deceived ourselves into believing that what we were experiencing was merely acting and that it was a feature of the movie. I lost all other thoughts as soon as I met his eyes. I was more afraid of that than anything else." Following the completion of the shoot, each actor went back to their own life, but the memory was still ingrained in them. After establishing one of Hollywood's most prestigious careers, Peck would eventually discover genuine contentment with Veronique Pisani, his second wife. In the meantime, Bergman's affair with Italian filmmaker Roberto Rossellini caused her to be embroiled in public scandal and cost her a number of years in Hollywood. However, it seemed from the tone of her statement that she remembered her time with Peake as being much more pure, untarnished by the criticism that came after her. Peake once remarked in private, "She was the most alive woman I ever knew. You felt the air change when Ingrid entered a room," friends said. Bergman saw Peake as a source of emotional stability that she infrequently encountered in her hectic life. "Perhaps everything would have been different if I had met Gregory at a different time," she stated in her letter. However, life only offers us fleeting moments and never promises them. But those moments seem to leave an enduring impression on both of us. Decades later, the letter's discovery transformed what had long been written off as a fleeting, romantic encounter into something far more silent but potent ode to two hearts that briefly met in the midst of ambition and creativity. It showed that beneath the glitz and acclaim, Bergman was still sensitive, able to feel deeply, and always reflective about her decisions. Ultimately, her statement that I was always appreciative of his generosity reverberated throughout the pages like a tender confession. In addition to reminding the public that even legends fall in love, make errors, and leave behind facts too delicate to be said out loud during their lifetime, they humanized a woman who is frequently solely perceived as a film icon. The note altered everything because it revealed the heart of a woman who dared to live a life of integrity and love, even at the expense of everything, rather than because it scandalized the past. On August 29, 1982, at midnight, Bergman passed away in London, marking her 67th birthday. 3 other individuals, including her ex-husband Lars Schmidt, were present after they had made their final toast to her hours earlier. At her bedside, a copy of The Little Prince was open to a page close to the end.